Normally, if you try to call the Florida legislature into session and it's not April or March or May, somewhere in that time period, they're like, leave me alone. I'm not coming to Tallahassee. That's not how we roll. Well, something was so important this year to them that the governor called them in, and they say they are rescuing you from vaccine mandates. What does it all mean? We're going to break it down today on Florida's Fourth Estate. I'm Matt Austin.
And I'm Ginger Gadsden. You know, some would argue, Matt, that some of them don't want to be in Tallahassee to begin with because it's lovely this time of year. I'm sorry, that's where you went to school, in Tallahassee.
Are
It is a
you
nice
bashing Tallahassee on this podcast
Absolutely.
with this Florida State Seminole? Are
What
you nuts?
what was I thinking? Oh my goodness.
Oh,
No,
man.
I'm so happy to see you, but Tallahassee. What would you have if the capital?
You better tread very carefully. I'm going to say hi to some of our friends right now. We've got Craig Schrader, good to see you, and T. Gray joining us.
I'm so glad they're joining us. But the person who can sort all of these things out, because we've been doing it in our news, and it's the big talk, and it's what everybody is interested in, because it really will have an impact on every single Floridian. But the person we have always turned to make it all make sense for us and explain sometimes the inexplicable is UCF history professor and our news analyst, Dr. Jim Clark. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. This is, by the way, a special time of year, Ginger. You're speaking of Tallahassee. The Pilgrims were latecomers. The first Thanksgiving was celebrated by Hernando de Soto with Indians near present-day Tallahassee.
Don't you feel
before.
ashamed, Ginger, for talking about Tallahassee, such a historic place like that?
I don't feel ashamed. Now I feel enlightened.
Yeah. And the original plan for Florida was to have two capitals, Pensacola and St. Augustine, and alternate the sessions, 1 year in St. Augustine, 1 year in Pensacola. They tried it. It was a disaster. And so they picked a spot exactly halfway between Pensacola and St. Augustine, and that would be Tallahassee.
That's like Florida politicians in a nutshell. We're going to go either Pensacola or St. Augustine. Now we'll do neither. We're just going to do Tallahassee. That'll work out.
That's how it ended up as the capital.
Places. I mean, I'm not gonna go on.
I just love how Jim just hemorrhages historical facts. Like as soon as it's not even like hi. It's like, by the way, the Pilgrims.
Did you know? It's like he drops knowledge all the time.
He is the reason that is the reason we're bringing him in. He is a very enlightened individual, UCF history professor. He knows it all. And Patricia's saying it's a nice surprise to see us this morning. And Joanne, hi from Lake Mary, Florida.
Hello.
If you're streaming with us, feel free to comment. I can see your comments. I can bring them in. If you're listening to this podcast after the fact, well, sorry, you can just kind of listen. Yes.
Ask questions. Questions.
We love it.
Jim will be able to answer it.
This is true. And so, Jim, what is it all mean? Why is this so important that it cannot wait? What is it? Maybe 4 or 5 months until the legislative session begins. Tell me about the timing of all this.
First of all, it could have waited. Many of these things were addressed in the most recent session. Some of them could have waited until January. Others the governor could have done by himself. But I think the governor saw an opportunity to make a political statement, to show that he was in control in Tallahassee, and to appeal to his base by passing these laws, which may or may not have any impact at all.
Okay, so that was going to be one of my questions, Jim. When you have the Biden administration saying, okay, this is the law of the land, and then our governor saying, well, this is the law of Florida. When you are a company, a business, someone that this will impact, which one do you have to, or are you beholden to listen to?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's why it's already in the courts. 16 states, including Florida, are already challenging President Biden's edict. And then if you'll remember, just a couple days ago, OSHA removed the edict for companies with more than 100 employees. So this legislation that ended up being passed only affects a small number, relatively speaking, people, mostly government workers.
Yeah, and this is sort of a multi-pronged set of laws here. I believe there were four separate ones. Let's break them down a little bit, Jim. I know that basically Governor DeSantis doesn't want people to get fired if they don't want to have to get a vaccine. And not just COVID, like say we have a pandemic in the future here. This counts for that as well. Say our technology really progresses in the future. Some pandemic comes along. We have a vaccine that can fix it right away. This will keep people from having to do that. And a lot of people are happy with that, Jim.
Yeah, a lot of people are, and this takes away from the Surgeon General the power to order vaccinations in Florida. This was a anti-terrorism bill originally passed by the Republicans after 9/11. People were worried there might be some biological warfare attack, and the state would need to move quickly to immunize people against some chemical attack. And so they gave the Surgeon General the power. Now they have taken that power away from the Surgeon General.
Okay, has it really been taken away though? Because I thought there was something weird about the wording from what I was reading, because it did not take out the word
The Surgeon
treatment.
General keeps some powers, but
Uh-oh, Jim's frozen in time.
Yeah, Jim is frozen. Let's give him a second here. We'll have to edit this out for the podcast. If you're joining us right now, we're glad to see you. But yeah, as we work through Jim's internet issues, this is a very complex set of laws here that just came in because, as some folks are pointing out, Gigi, I'm gonna take Jim off so we can let him
Get him fired back
Yeah,
up
let him
again.
get fired up again. But some of these, we're not even sure of the real impact. Jim mentioned that at the beginning of the show. Like there's this one law that basically starts to enact our own state OSHA instead of using the federal OSHA system. There's obviously been a lot of back and forth because OSHA is wanting these vaccine mandates. But the big question is that was brought up by some local lawmakers actually is that for us to go without federal OSHA, for us to not be under that umbrella, it would actually have to be approved by the Biden administration, who would,
Which likely won't happen.
yeah,
And a lot of people are saying that, you know, these things, like many of these laws that were passed or bills that were passed, will not have teeth. But it is really exciting to the people who don't want these things in place, right? So I don't know if it's just symbolic. I want Jim to weigh in on that. If it's just more of a symbolic gesture, but it seems like a lot to go through just to get some sort of symbolism going. But you know, only time will tell what will happen on these things, because as we have these go through the courts, it is a slow process.
yeah.
And we won't get any resolution probably anytime for a while.
This is true. And one thing that I'm always looking at when you see these is these, sort of big stances in politics. Some people who criticize Governor DeSantis sort of insinuate that he doesn't know what he's doing or he doesn't have a rhyme or reason. This is a very smart guy, and he doesn't
would beg
make
to differ with all of them.
Yes, he doesn't make moves that he is not expected for his supporters to like. And in Florida, to win the governorship, you can't just win Republicans. You have to win. There are more independents in the state than Democrats. It's like a third of the voters. So
Yeah.
so he
and
is.
he's already he's announced that he is running for re-election. So I feel like this really gets his people, the people who are supportive of him, going. And I just don't think that he does anything without really thinking it through long term, what the ramification could be. I don't think he's just making knee-jerk decisions like, well, I don't like this, so let's do this. It's like, everything, there is a rhyme or a reason. It is thought out. Jim's
Yes.
still frozen.
This is very true. Jim just called me back in. I just pulled him up, and I think someone like ran over a wire or something at his neighborhood. I hear him. Jim, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I know. I'm just sad that we have the screen grab of him right
If
here.
you could only see what is streaming for people right now, you look like you're
the worst screen grab.
If you're in
Thanks a lot.
mid-sneeze, you are in mid-sneeze, my friend. But we're going to go with it because. So can you tell me, especially with the OSHA aspect of this, we were just talking about it. It doesn't really matter, right? Because in the end, the Biden administration would have to agree, okay, Florida, you don't have to go by OSHA standards anymore. And that's most likely never going to happen.
Yeah, there are about 10 states that have their own standards. Mostly they follow OSHA's kind of national standards. Some have enhanced them. Surprisingly, those are all northern states. They do not want, they have not historically usurped OSHA rather, in southern states. So I'm not sure anything is going to come of this, simply because corporations don't like having two sets of rules. We see this in California, for example, where the automakers have to meet California emission standards and then separately U.S. Emission standards. So I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of support for creating our own bureaucracy.
I mean, I think the real winner in this is OSHA, because people had to look up, like, what is OSHA,
What's OSHA again?
and what does it do? I mean, don't you think? It's like it doesn't come up in regular conversation, and it has recently.
No, and OSHA had 3 exemptions to begin with, and the legislature simply added 2. So OSHA had recognized religion and things like that before. So there's not a whole lot of difference in the DeSantis bills and the OSHA rules.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do want to so we've been talking about the moves the Republicans are making. We do have a local lawmaker, Anna Eskamani. We had her talking about this on one of our shows. Let's listen to her side of it, and she is talking about that business side and the confusion.
We have put businesses, small and large, in such an awkward position where they have to decide, am I going to follow federal law or am I going to follow state law?
So that's sort of the issue. That was exactly what Ginger was talking about. We've got our federal government saying one thing, we've got our state government saying another thing, and it is very, very confusing, much like the internet that I'm having a hard time figuring out right now.
No, it's not only feds versus the state; it's your employer versus the state versus the feds. As we've talked about this week, Ginger. What do you do if your boss says, hey, you have to get a shot? And the governor says, no, you don't have to. Do you listen? Who do you listen to?
I mean, if the governor's going to give me a job, I'm listening to him.
Yeah.
But
Who signs the checks?
Employed,
that's the question.
Yeah. If I'm going to stay employed, then,
Yeah. So for example, Disney is a California corporation, and they have issued edicts. Not only have they issued edicts, they've negotiated this whole issue with their unions. And so they have set up a procedure and that they're living with. And now the governor is saying, no, you don't need to follow that. So who do you listen to?
It's
sort of, if they're based in California, right? You have to go by what California is doing? I would think. Well, I don't know.
And there's some hypocrisy. I mean, can they tell their employees at Disneyland they have to get shots, but tell their employees at Disney World, nah, you don't need shots? So which way do you go here if you're a big corporation?
It reminds me of when you're a kid and your mom tells you one thing and your dad tells you another, and you're kind of like, which set of rules am I going to I'm going to do the thing that I want to do. Am I going to get in trouble at the end of this by mom or dad?
Yeah, you're like, "Mom, Dad sent me in to ask you what you think about this," and you're like, "Dad, Mom sent me to ask you what you think about this,"
Yeah.
and you just kinda,
Uh,
it's kinda like how we ended up with Tallahassee, you meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So,
What a
Jim, is it kind of like with the cruise ships we're going through as well? Because remember, they were saying you have to show proof that you are vaccinated, and there's so many cruise ships that sail out of Florida, and they're doing it again, and they still are requiring that.
Yeah, you'll remember that when this started, Norwegian Cruise Lines went to federal court and they won their right to require proof of vaccination. I wondered if there was anything in the timing this week as the governor was signing the legislation. Disney announced that anybody older than 5 had to have a shot to sail on its
Mhm.
cruise ship. So Disney seems to be doubling down in the midst of this new Florida law.
Yeah, and I would think that other companies would see that example from Disney and Norwegian and feel a little emboldened by it if they are requiring vaccines.
Well, Ginger, the whole thing is going to be academic either way. Either the federal courts, and this will be in the next few weeks, either the federal courts will say, hey, President Biden has the power to do that, and that makes it a federal rule, or they'll say, no, he doesn't, and everything's out the window anyway. So what the legislature did, most of it will be determined by the courts, and that'll happen probably in just a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, I think you sum it up well, Jim, when you say we're not even sure if this is really going to affect your life, but certainly it would appear it's going to get political points for, this is sort of, no matter what happens in your life, this is certainly going to affect and swing possible elections one way or the other. And we're just going to have to wait and see. Obviously, Republicans think this is Joe Biden, pretty unpopular right now, Jim, if you go by the polls. Which we often do. And so you think Governor Ron DeSantis is kind of taking this moment in time as he's unpopular to sort of say, hey, well, I'm the opposite of him.
Yeah, the rise of Governor DeSantis has been remarkable. Remember, he was just elected in 2020, and he at the time was a congressman who no one had ever heard of. Remember, in the early polls, he was polling 1%. And now he is mentioned prominently as a leading candidate for president in 3 years. So this has been just an amazing kind of turn of events for him to go from a little known congressman with no statewide standing to a legitimate presidential candidate.
Yeah, but to play devil's advocate here, I know Matt saying that the president's numbers are down, and they are down. That's just a fact. But we have to keep in mind he's been in office for 10 months. And I feel like a lot of it, he came into office and people had these expectations right away, and everything takes time. So would it be fair to say that, you know, while it's really rock bottom right now, not even rock bottom, but it's going in that direction, that it's really too soon to start looking. It's always, and who believes the numbers anyway, right? You believe them when they're in your favor, and when they're not in your favor, you think, oh, nobody listens to numbers.
Yeah, 200 years ago, John Adams said that no political party is closer to defeat than when it's at its pinnacle. And if you look, if you look over the last 200 years, he's been right. We've counted one political party or another out half a dozen times. After Barry Goldwater lost in 1964, everybody said, the Republican Party's dead. And 4 years later, they took the White House back. So we've seen this happen time after time. When the first George Bush was president, people thought, well, after Reagan and Bush, the Democrats are dead. And then Bill Clinton won the White House. So these things are cyclical. And anybody who tries to bet one way or another, I think, is a fool. politics is like an NBA game, Matt. It comes down to the last 2 minutes. And right now, don't pay any attention to, oh my goodness, disaster is looming.
And these days, it almost seems like if you're the one in charge, you're the least popular. No matter which party it is, it's like there's this target on your back once you hold the presidency, and the other groups just firing shots at will. And that's sort of the way our political system seems made all of a sudden, Jim.
And President Biden really never had a base, unlike President Trump, who clearly had a base. And so you see people sniping at President Biden within his own party, the progressives, criticizing him as sharply as the Republicans. So he's kind of getting it from both sides.
I think people are surprised by that because they thought that everybody was just going to be in lockstep with whatever happened.
Yeah, I think that these bills he is passing, the infrastructure bill and now the $2 trillion bill that the House just passed and goes to the Senate, are calling for remarkable change. And yet we see Democratic progressives voting against it because they say it doesn't go far enough. So I think that the Biden White House has been caught kind of by surprise by who its opponents are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a fascinating situation that we've never been able to deal with in history. With this, I mean, we've had pandemics in the past, but the way it has been politicized and used is fascinating for either side. So we'll see. We'll see how
the debate will continue.
Yes, the debate shall continue. That's for sure.
Can I just say the real debate today, Jim, and I need you to weigh in on this. Thanksgiving is coming up. Christmas tree is already up in the Austin house.
Look at that.
Too soon?
Thing looks good, doesn't it, Jim?
Yes. So Ginger, I will leave you with your last history lesson of the day.
Of course.
Your last history lesson, and maybe you do this, Ginger, and maybe you do this, Matt, without realizing that this was something begun by the Spanish 400 years ago in St. Augustine, and now done by people throughout the country. It's the tradition of putting a single candle in each window of your home at Christmas time. And you see people do it now. They're electric, obviously, but it was the Spanish who began at Christmas time putting candles, one candle in each window. And so some of you may be doing that tradition.
Interesting.
Well, do you know what that represents, Jim?
Actually, I don't. I do not. It was something.
What?
It was something. I'm sorry. It was something. A tradition, obviously brought over from Spain. So, but it starts here. People forget. Not only was the first Christmas celebrated here, but the first Thanksgiving, but the first Christmas, the first Easter. All these things are ours. So. We need to claim them.
That's right. We should. We don't do a good enough job claiming our historical
and reminding people about it. Too.
Hey, we're pretty awesome out there. Jim Clark. Hey, I just want to say in advance, when you watch this over and you just have a frozen face for the entire time, I'm super sorry, and I love you, but you sound fantastic.
My guess is that it's because I got my doctorate at Florida that you've done this on purpose, Matt, to get back.
He's running the controls. He's running the controls.
Yeah. I've also drawn a mustache on you. And
by the way, an FSU alumni will be on TV tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah.
And he was Burt Reynolds' teammate at FSU.
He means Lee Corso. That's who he's talking about.
Lee Corso from ESPN.
Oh my God!
Is an FSU alumni and was Burt Reynolds' teammate at FSU back when they were winning games. Ginger,
you know, Jim.
They don't remember what that feels like.
Finally, a historical fact that I actually enjoyed, and then you had to ruin it. Jim Clark, UCF history professor, all
Good
around
job.
good guy, political Adonis, as I like to call him. Thank you so much for joining us. Ginger, you're as wonderful as ever. Thank you. Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
See you.